in Spanish. That is a huge topic. Contrary to Jesus Christ, Merlin and King Arthur were real characters. There are attempts to discredit them as legends, but they are not, and I have strong data that indicates, for example, that Merlin was possibly the last Druid in Britain. And yes, he had advanced Gnostic knowledge, as well as knowledge of technology and alchemy that people at the time would see as magical powers. Yes, of this I am absolutely sure. I don't know if he was the last Druid, but I do know that Merlin was a Druid. And this also explains why they have tried to erase his great influence by making him only legend, as they have tried to erase completely everything to do with the Druids, Gnostics, and their participation in the Celtic culture, and with it, in the formation of Britain, more specifically Ireland and Scotland, and from there, in the rest of the Western world. Merlin was King Arthur's royal advisor and his friend. King Arthur did nothing without talking to Merlin first. It is a mystery how Merlin ended up. There existed people who matched Merlin's and Arthur's profiles. But in itself, what is known as the story itself, what is found in ancient books, is a corrected and augmented compilation of many events of the time, mixed with things that cannot be verified that most likely, yes, was fiction literature. But the mythological basis of those legends, taken by several authors, is real. Even though those legends seem to come from the bards, who in fact worked hand in hand with the Druids as the ones who told or passed on the information. Another problem is the modern conception of fiction that they erroneously apply to the past. Because in modern times, from the 19th century to the present, the literature of novelistic fiction, as it is known today, was born. Yes, it is true that before there were many novels, but not with the same modern structure that is basically total fiction, such as romance fiction novels or detective genres, and the more recent science fiction, that from the beginning was born as a controlled genre of literature, and with control agendas behind it, from the beginning, with few exceptions. Generalizing a huge and very rich literary world, there were in this case the sagas, that are a compilation of hyperbolic artistic form of real events. Since at that time there were no newspapers, or anything of that nature, no mass media. So it was up to the people like the bards to pass the information. And they had another mentality, in the sense that they strove hard to keep the story as is, without adding elements of exaggeration or fictitious ones. It is from these sagas, heavily destroyed since the time of the Roman emperors, before generals Vespasius and his son Titus, that the systematic destruction of all that has to do with the Druids and the Bards is born and develops from the year circa 50 BC to the appearance of the French Inquisition around the 11th century, which replaces this system with a more generalized system of control and domination of the information and the beliefs of the world, controlled by Rome, Cabal. So to know how much of King Arthur and Merlin is true is a nightmare. But what is true is that there were people with these characteristics just at the time when the first Crusades began to take place. That is the most reliable historical point or framework in which this story unfolds.
But Merlin and King Arthur were after the Romans.
Yes, of course. That's why I say above that they lived around the time of the First Crusades. The problem is that because of the addition of 300 years to the Gregorian calendar, it is not possible to calculate the time well. But the procedure of persecution against the Druids and the Bards began with Vespasius and Titus in Roman times, around the invention of Jesus Christ. And that persecution continued from that time until the years circa 11th century, with the introduction of the French Inquisition, which determines about 11 centuries of progressive destruction against the Druids and the Bards, and the destruction of the Celtic culture in general.
So what can be known about Merlin today is more disinformation with control agenda? Like that the Druids were a mythological literary invention? And why so much interest in the destruction of the Druids and Bards?
Yes, this is how it is handled in many places, if not entirely denying the existence of Druids as literary inventions, using the saga of Merlin and King Arthur as an example of Druids fiction, then accepting that they did exist, but that they were only barbarian priests and uncivilized peoples who did not even use writing. That is officially said about the Druids and Bards, that they did not use writing. That's how primitive they were. That is disinformation of the Cabal. What really happened was that all their writings were either confiscated by the Vatican and taken to Rome, or destroyed and burned. It is also very important to connect this with the destruction and burning of books and papyri of the Library of Alexandria, which was nothing more than part of the destruction of the documents, books, and writings of the Druids and the Bards. This is very important because it destroys the true human history, as those writings and historical accounts connect the Celtic people, Druids, and Bards with the Egyptian civilization as the very basis of that civilization, something that the official historians vehemently deny, but which the true researchers, who are few, and our records clearly indicate to be the truth, the point on the planet where Western civilization was born is Ireland, Scotland, which predates pre-dynastic Egypt, Babylon, Sumer, and China. And why so much interest in the destruction of the Druids and Bards? Because in the first place, they told and recorded information from medicine to technology and history that contradicts the new official history that the Cabal was putting together as world reset at the time of Vespasian and Titus, where it was necessary to erase all information prior to the imposition of a new world paradigm. That is, to erase all the past, to adopt only the creationist story of the new Jewish Christian religion, based on the writings of the Old Testament and the New Testament. They needed to erase all historical records and knowledge of all kinds that contradicted the Old and New Testament, so that Rome Cabal would have total control over the truth and over the people.
Incredible. The destruction of human history through the burning of books.
Today's censorship and book burning respond to the same interests and the same perpetrators. It's the same thing, same agenda. That's why they destroyed the Druids. It is true that there may have been other, more localized reasons, as was the total Roman domination over the lands of Britain. But it is not just that. It goes beyond that.
Was the burning of the Library of Alexandria contemporary with the burning of the books of the Druids and the Bards? My understanding is that it is at the time when a reset is made to a new civilization that would be the current one.
Yes, it was just when the campaign of destruction of the Celtic people, Druids and Bards, began. They started with the burning of the Library of Alexandria, because the Romans knew that there was a collection of very complete writings on world history there, and on technologies, and wisdom of all kinds coming from the Gnostics, who are connected with the Druids and the Bards. It should be noted that the Library of Alexandria was especially dangerous for Rome Cabal and their interests, because it was physically right in the lands of the Middle East, Egypt, where they developed their stories of the Jewish people who leave Egypt following Moses and spend 40 days in a desert looking for the promised land. And that is when Moses goes up to Mount Ararat and God gives him the tablets with the 10 commandments that he puts in the Ark of the Covenant. What was in the Library of Alexandria were documents that could not be left there, but had to be taken to the Vatican, and the copies destroyed, the burning itself, because that Gnostic, Druidic, Bardic information contradicted their Old and New Testament stories. So the connection of the imposition of the new Judeo-Christian religion and the topic of the invention of Jesus Christ goes hand in hand and connects directly to the burning of the Library of Alexandria. This information and what I say here is based entirely or almost entirely on non-human records and on experiences of other versions of Swaroos, who were in those times living this in the flesh. They left their detailed records in the form of journals on their Suzy ships, which were then downloaded into the AI databanks of later and more modern Suzy ships like this one. The burning of the Library of Alexandria connection to the destruction of the Celts, Druids, and Bards and connection to the Gnostics as a means of getting their Judeo-Christian religion in, you won't find it on the net or in the books on earth. Or if you do, I would be very surprised, since the few who connect this are still mired in their own historical fog, like wasting time deciphering the time of Jesus. And I have a feeling this information above may be seen as dangerous or sensitive to the Cabal, as it exposes them for what they are and their tricks. And they might investigate or ask where you took this from, as these are strong accusations based on solid facts. This is information that people should not have, according to them, because they have been trying to erase what has been said here today for the best part of 2,000 years. I think this is a huge, necessary topic, and one that goes a long way, even if it is not taken into account as we would like it to be. It never will be, because that's not how the world works. They will bury it as disinformation, as they always do, because they have achieved the most efficient way to hide everything that contradicts them, which is to say that everything is fake news. And the use of digital technology and the internet only serves them to hide everything in plain sight. Because you cannot check the veracity of anything online, contrary to what happened at the time of the Library of Alexandria, that if you had a written papyrus in your hands, it was a strong document as proof of the veracity of what it alleges. That's why they had to destroy everything. We, the Swaroos, have been here for a better part of 12,000 years, never being human. But that makes us a bridge between the extraterrestrial and the human, because we know both worlds well and can connect what happens outside the Earth with what happens inside. And few non-human races have that ability. The Taigetans try, but they have many problems.
I know. Athena, what exactly is a druid? What was their job with the citizens? I think they were available to everyone, be it people, plants, animals, etc. Did they treat everyone equally, or am I wrong? Did they believe in deities?
To answer that, I must first investigate how the Druid is viewed from Earth, as I only have my own concepts, which I will give below. This is important because my mentioning the differences denotes a knowledge of mine on the subject, and not just my own direct imposition or speculation about it. For me, a druid is basically a wise person, whether male or female, because at that time there were both, although it is centered around the male figure. They had very advanced knowledge and passed on to them by other druids from very remote times, going as far back as Atlantis, and the immigration from Atlantis to the highlands of Ireland and Scotland. Their knowledge was of medicine and herbalism, as well as of history, and also of very advanced concepts of metaphysics, and of the connection between the so-called material world and the spirit world, in a similar or comparative way to the knowledge of the shamans, or wise men, healers of Native American peoples, with whom they shared the same kind of information, coming from the same initial ancestral source. That is, mastery of herbalism and medicine, and their connection with the mystical, spiritual, etheric world, where they could access to ask favors to spirits, entities, and disembodied people in order to carry out their purposes, which were mostly for the healing of a person. The Druids knew that there is no physical world, that everything is etheric, and that everything is interconnected, that there is no clear barrier between the spirit world with the material physical world, and that the causes of all diseases, and I mean all, is an imbalance by way of interference between one side and the other, the side of pure consciousness that generates the physical world, projected mainly and primarily through the body called physical. So they work with one foot on the spiritual side and the other on the physical side as a bridge. As Swarus, we are bridges between the extraterrestrial and the human. They can also be called witches, since witchcraft itself is this: the interconnecting and using the characteristics of what is possible and achievable in one realm applied to the other, as well as the colloquial interpretation or of normal people, in the sense that everything that is not explained, everything they do not know, they interpret it as magic, when in reality it is only either technology or pure knowledge, and knowing how to apply it. This, it should be noted, is not without serious risks, so I do not suggest in any way to try this at home, as it involves forces that are not only unknown, but can be highly damaging. Druids are also taken as keepers of information, records of all kinds, keepers of the great logos as defined, which includes medicine, history, and technology, as well as counts of all kinds. Druids are also taken simply as wise people, guides, elders to talk to for advice. And all of this above logically implies that they had a very strong connection to nature, as they do not separate it from who they are and who we all are, knowing how to use its life force for their purposes, the properties of each of their plants, herbalism, and the strength of the spirits of the trees and the entire forest, knowing how to connect and interact with other beings not entirely physical, the so-called elementals, knowing how to invoke their characteristics for help to realize their purposes. The Druids are taken with a strongly positive connotation, to do good only, but the notation or name warlock, witch, can be applied to the same Druid, only observing where he leans, towards good or evil, even considering that the notion of good and evil is relative. The whole context of the Druids and the Celts has a strong inclination towards the English-speaking world, as it is logical. where it should be noted that when they were positive, they were called Druids, and when not, they were called sorcerers, which has a negative or regressive connotation, being that they are basically the same. An example of this can be Gandalf as a Druid and Sauron as a sorcerer. Although it is difficult to say for sure, since the last Celtic Druids, either they just call themselves that and are not even a shadow of their former selves, or they are simply hiding from persecution even today. I would venture to say that the closest people to being true Druids with the knowledge of old are not in the old world, but live among Native American peoples. Specifically, they are found in the Navajo Nation today. The Navajo, whose correct name sounds something like Dinemike-ya, phonetic, still retain Druid skills today. They are called medicine men, or sages, or priests, or witches, associated with the real skinwalker phenomena of that region. They are extremely secretive about who they pass this kind of information to, and do not share it with other than an extremely exclusive group within their own Navajo Nation. This information I am giving you of the existence of warlocks and shamans there, still with a very detailed knowledge of all the Druidic arts, is again sensitive and difficult to obtain. I am sharing Navajo secrets here. They still retain the ways to connect with the spirit world. They can still ask them for help. And they also live with one foot on the physical side and one foot on the spiritual side. People on earth are strongly conditioned to believe only in the existence of what is physical matter according to them, because even that is not real as they believe. So they are not aware of all that surrounds them and interferes with their daily lives. These Navajo shamans know what they do. They know their art, and they hide it from persecution. And their abilities are comparatively similar to the abilities of the Celtic Druids, because they also know how to alter reality itself, the perception and the conjunction interference between both sides, physical and spiritual, mastering skills such as transformation, shapeshifter, and teleportation, among other abilities. This can be seen and observed in the extremely real legends and with solid evidence of the skinwalkers and the Nahuales further down in Latin America. There is no material world. Everything is spiritual world. It is only ideas that form the concept and properties you call the material world. But there are countless other worlds created with other kinds of ideas and therefore with other rules.
American Indians have this knowledge thanks to the Celtic Druids. What are real skinwalker phenomena? That is to say that no real Druid would boast of claiming to be a Druid.
The American Indians or shamans of the Native American peoples have that knowledge from the same base branch or from the same base source as the Celts, but not thanks to the Celts. That is, at the same time, both were nurtured, stimulated, and created. This since the re-emergence of life on Earth just after the Great Flood. That is, for at least 12,000 years.
So our ideas on Earth, the collective unconscious, makes us think that these are two worlds when they are one.
Yes, that's basically what it is, simplified. Because the collective unconscious is the whole set of ideas that by social agreements form what is accepted as reality on Earth. But as I said above, they are just ideas, a framework of beliefs. Even your science is based on that same framework of ideas, creating a self-sustaining mathematical world that does not reflect the external world. The so-called spirit world is nothing more than the transfer of the same agreements and the same belief system framed by the collective unconscious to the non-material world through the people who have passed away, the disincarnated, because when they die, they take their belief systems and their perceptions, prejudices, and expectations to the other side, creating, in the so-called etheric world, a crude and caricatured reflection of the same material world in which they were in life. What happens here is that people with strong attachments to the material, to their ideas of what the material world is, are the ones who stay and do not transcend to other higher planes. That is, they do not reincarnate on other planets or return to the source. They are the so-called lost souls who are wandering as entities and spirits between their world and the so-called material world. This kind of lost souls still hold ego and idea of I, of feeling somebody. Therefore, they still manifest a body perceptible to them and to the others among them, who, by having the same perception or existential frequency, share a new collective unconscious, but on the etheric or spiritual side. As these people have not transcended, they have attachments to strongly self-destructive or material ideas, with everything that goes hand in hand with that. Their values, not very positive, and twisted deformations of their concepts of reality form with this a caricatured reflection of what the world itself was when they were alive. That is to say that the same material world, same streets and buildings, can be seen or manifested for them in their mind, in that non-physical side. But as their minds and their concepts and values are not very positive, this will also be reflected in that world, thus creating a gloomy version of the physical reality as it is known on the side of the living. Same streets and buildings, but all gloomy, decadent, and with problems, because they also form clans and groups or gangs there. But it is only a reflection of themselves, because they are concordant with that frequency, and because they do not know how to live or exist in any other way as a direct consequence of the disinformation that the Cabal Illuminati has imposed on the population.
But are they aware of the copy of the world they were in and where they are now?
It depends on each individual spirit. Many do know it and stay there, because that is where they live, and that is who they are, and that is what they choose to be. Others do not know it. They have not realized that they are dead. This for various reasons, such as the extreme rapidness with which they died, or the general characteristics surrounding their death.
Are they trying to connect from the astral with this 3D world to continue with their evil plans?
Those who know, yes, do so by interfering strongly with the material world, by way of interference and entity infestation in the bodies of the living who allow themselves to be manipulated from there, again by frequency concordance. So it is very important to say that the result of everything that happens in the physical world, what happens day by day, is not only the result of the actions of the living and their collective unconscious, but it is interconnected and intertwined with the world of the dead on the ether side, their agendas, and their own collective unconscious. To complicate things further, both worlds also have strong interference with other worlds, with the so-called extraterrestrials, their material lives, their own collective unconscious, which all mixes into the material world of human civilization, and outside as well, in a huge soup of interferences. And to make it all even more complicated, to this must be added the direct interference of other so-called timelines that are not isolated from each other in particular, interfering with each other with strong influence. And all this above is my explanation of why the Merlin and King Arthur topic is a bit difficult to clarify with precision.